good day or good evening, depending on where you find yourself in the time zones. My name is Nadia McConnell. I'm president of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important discussion. When I looked at the landscape of various conferences and meetings, much of the attention is focused on security issues, rightly so, the need that Ukraine has for additional weapons in order to win. Also, a lot of discussion about the reconstruction and the rebuilding that is to come, but not as much as I believe is needed to talk about some of the most innocent victims of Putin's war, and that's the children. And there are so many aspects to it. There are the children that are being traumatized in Ukraine because of the constant shelling, the fact that their fathers are gone, and then, of course, those that have been kidnapped. So we decided to launch an informational and advocacy campaign to deal with the very many aspects of this issue. Our very first webinar 2 weeks ago was dealing with the legal question. And all the experts, including Ambassador Stephen Rapp, who was at the State Department Ambassador at Large for War Crimes, the conclusion unanimous is that the abduction of children is a genocidal act. So now we know there's no wiggle room about exactly what this war crime is. Today, we are going to be privileged to have with us to discuss this topic people that are actually in the forefront of this issue, particularly dealing with the kidnapped children. Leading our discussion and moderating, we are privileged to have Janice Helwig, who has been dealing with this issue for many, many years. She has served on the U.S. Helsinki Commission, I think, for over 28 years, and also has served as the U.S. representative at the OSCE conferences in Vienna. And she has had many actions within the Congress last year, and I know that there are plans for this new Congress coming in. Janice will lead the discussion and introduce everybody, but before I turn it over to her, I also want to extend a special welcome to the new Deputy Prosecutor General, Victoria Litvinova, who has joined us for this discussion. She was just appointed, I believe, last week. So a special welcome. You know, I just returned from the Ukrainian prayer breakfast. One of the members of parliament, Honcharenko from Odessa, talked about the fact that his wife and 2 children are still in Odessa, and that his 4-year-old son can tell the difference between missiles that are the Russian missiles that are coming in and the ones where the Ukrainians are firing to protect them. This is not something that a 4-year-old should be dealing with. In the coming weeks and months, we are going to dive deeper into some of these additional issues, the trauma that has been suffered by children, various types of trauma. And then also we will feature organizations within Ukraine and also outside of Ukraine that are helping to deal with these issues of trauma and the kind of programs that exist. You know, the resources are needed for all the very many things that are taking place in Ukraine. But in addition to resources, what is needed is the human capital to help Ukrainians deal with things that they have never had to deal with before. You know, before the war started in 2014, there was no Ministry for Veterans Affairs and the like. So there is we feel the need to create perhaps a working group to deal with this issue, and also to perhaps have a summit in the late spring or early summer to deal with some of these humanitarian issues that perhaps are not getting as much attention as they should. And now I'm going to turn it over to the experts. Janice Helwig.
Thank you, Nadia. And just to build a little bit on the background of what you were saying, Ukraine's children are suffering serious injury and trauma due to Russia's war on Ukraine. According to the United Nations, almost 2/3 of the country's children have been displaced. Thousands have been injured. According to Ukraine's Prosecutor General, at least 459 children are confirmed to have been killed, although that number is likely much higher, as Ukrainian authorities have not been able to access some of the most decimated areas of Ukraine, such as Mariupol. In addition to the immediate dangers of war, the effects of war on children could have lasting consequences. Many Ukrainian children have witnessed unimaginable violence, including the murders of their own parents or family members. They have had to endure the stress of being under almost constant bombardment in fear for their safety. Others have experienced hunger, cold, and weeks spent hiding in wet, frigid basements without daylight or fresh air and without sanitation or healthcare. This constant stress takes a heavy toll on the youngest victims of war. Today, we're going to discuss one way in which Ukrainian children are suffering from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian children are being forcibly taken to Russia and put up for adoption into Russian families in an apparent effort to assimilate them, a practice that genocide scholar Timothy Snyder has said could be considered genocide under the 1948 Genocide Convention. The U.S. State Department has said it has reliable information that Russian authorities have deliberately separated Ukrainian children from their parents during so-called filtration procedures and abducted others from orphanages before putting them up for adoption inside inside Russia. Disgustingly, Russian propaganda cynically portrays its adoption of Ukrainian children as an act of generosity that gives new homes to helpless minors. Russian state media shows local officials hugging and kissing newly arrived Ukrainian children and handing them Russian passports. Today, we're going to hear from 3 panelists who are working on the ground in Ukraine to rescue and to support children and families affected by war. Let me introduce our panelists. First, we will hear from Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Victoria Litvinova. Prior to her appointment as Deputy Prosecutor General, Ms. Litvinova worked as the Deputy Head of the Specialized Environmental Prosecutor's Office in the Prosecutor General's Office. She will continue to take care of the work of the Specialized Environmental Prosecutor's Office, as well as areas of countering human rights violations in law enforcement and penitentiary spheres, and protecting the interests of children. Then second, we will hear from Mr. Mykola Kuleba. He is the director of the NGO Save Ukraine, which was established in 2014 to provide assistance to vulnerable populations in the war zone in Ukraine. Currently, Save Ukraine is providing assistance to orphans, children with disabilities, and low-income families affected by the war in Ukraine, and is conducting evacuation operations of children. Previously, Mr. Kuleba served as the Commissioner for Children's Rights in the Office of the President of Ukraine. We're also joined by Mr. Dmytro Filipenko, who is the International Government and Donor Relations Director for Save Ukraine and is responsible for raising awareness about Save Ukraine's activities. Mr. Filipenko has many years of experience working with international NGOs and also with the Ukrainian government. And so with that, I will turn the floor over to Deputy Prosecutor General Litvinova.
Hello, everyone. I'm really sorry I don't speak English fluently, and I use help my interpreter in this situation. Почну з того, що я сама мати 2 дітей, і тому тема захисту прав дітей під час війни для мене є особливо чутливою.
So I shall start from saying that myself, I'm a mother to 2 children, so it is very personal for me, this issue.
І на прикладі своїх дітей я знаю, як вони дійсно страждають від війни, оскільки обмежується їх право на повноцінну освіту, бо певний час освітнього процесу вони перебувають в бомбосховищах, і право на соціальні зв'язки, бо дуже часто вони навчаються дистанційно.
I see by example of my children how they suffer from this war. When they are at school, they often are at the shelters due to the challenges of the Syrians, and also they lose their social connection because often the study is remote.
Але сьогодні все ж таки ми зупинимося на питаннях переміщення українських дітей на територію країни-агресора.
But today we shall speak about the forcible displacement of children from the territory of Ukraine to the territory of the aggressor country.
На сьогодні органами прокуратури спільно з Нацполіцією перевіряються факти переміщення понад 16 тисяч українських дітей на непідконтрольну та російську територію.
As of today, the prosecutor, together with the representatives of the National Police of Ukraine, are verifying the facts of forcible displacement of more than 16,000 Ukrainian children to the territory of the Russian Federation and the territory uncontrolled by Ukraine.
Я звертаю увагу, що це не точна цифра, і точну цифру встановити дуже складно, оскільки країна-агресор не надає жодних чітких даних про українських дітей на своїй території.
I shall say that this figure is not exact because the aggressor country does not provide any information about our children in their territories.
У нас розслідується магістральне кримінальне провадження, в рамках якого ми можемо певним чином перевіряти інформацію.
We investigate the core big case within the framework of which we can verify information.
Переважно ми отримуємо інформацію від інформаційного бюро, яке в Україні представлено як як державне підприємство, яке збирає відповідні дані. І передаємо їх на опрацювання до Національної поліції.
So we collect information, we obtain information from the informational bureau, which in Ukraine is represented by the state enterprise, the Ukrainian National Center for Building Peace. And then we refer this data collected to the National Police of Ukraine.
Серед переміщених і депортованих дітей є діти, які мають спеціальний статус, діти-сіроти, діти позбавлені батьківського піклування і діти, які втратили батьків вже під час бомбардувань.
Among the children who were displaced or deported, there are children with special status like orphans, children deprived of parental care, children who lost their parents during the bombardments and shelling of our cities and villages, children displaced together with their parents.
Ми фіксуємо певну активність Російської Федерації щодо політики по відношенню до українських дітей, яка спрямована на припинення їх національної ідентичності.
We can trace the activity of the Russian Federation aimed at our Ukrainian children, which is the purpose of which is to deprive the Ukrainian identity of our children.
В тому числі країна-агресор приймає нормативні акти, які дозволяють в швидкому порядку дітям отримати російське в спрощеному порядку дітям отримати російське громадянство.
And the aggressor country adopts some normative acts, some legislation that allows for a simplified procedure for obtaining Russian citizenship by those children.
Мабуть, ви всі чули, що часто країна-агресор прикривається лозунгами свого наступу на Україну, мотивуючи це тим, що вони захищали російськомовне населення в Україні. Разом із тим, вони не забезпечують українським дітям на своїй території жодного права на українську освіту.
I guess that everyone heard that the Russian Federation told when they attacked Ukraine that they were, so to say, protecting the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine. But as we can see now, they actually do not provide to Ukrainian children any Ukrainian education.
Якщо казати з правової точки зору про кваліфікацію дій країни-агресора, то прокурори зараз збирають докази з огляду на доведення наступних злочинів.
So if we talk about the legal classification of crimes, the prosecutors in Ukraine are now gathering evidence to prove the following crimes.
Для цілей злочину геноцида нам необхідно встановити примусову передачу дітей однієї людської групи в іншу з метою знищення їх національної ідентичності.
So for the purposes of genocide crime, we have to establish the forcible transfer of children from one human group to another group, so to destroy their identity.
Аналогічна примусова депортація є воєнним злочином. І якщо вона скоєна проти цивільних осіб без виправдання, тобто якщо йде мова про фактичне примусове переміщення цивільного населення, в тому числі дітей.
Similarly, the forcible deportation is also a war crime if it is committed against the civilian persons without any reason. That is the forcible displacement of civilian population, including children.
Таке порушення відноситься до серйозних порушень норм міжнародного гуманітарного права.
And this violation is within the serious and grave violation of the standards of international humanitarian law.
Якщо казати про злочини проти людства, то злочин депортації також є злочином відповідно до Римського статуту і може бути предметом розгляду в Міжнародному кримінальному суді.
And if we say about the crime against humanity, the deportation is also considered as such kind of crime according to the Rome Statute, and also can be considered in the International Criminal Court.
Як вірно зазначила Джаніс, своє примусове переміщення дітей на непідконтрольну територію та територію Російської Федерації Росія обґрунтовує кращими інтересами, цинічно обґрунтовує кращими інтересами дитини.
As Janice properly says, that the deportation of children to the territory of the Russian Federation, they just trying to justify it cynically justified by the best interests of the children.
І звісно, що Україна потребує підтримки міжнародної спільноти у питанні повернення українських дітей на нашу територію додому.
And of course, Ukraine needs some assistance from the international community in the issues of returning our children back to Ukraine.
Наразі ми маємо 126 українських дітей, які були незаконно переміщені і у подальшому повернуті або на територію України, або на територію європейських країн із Російської Федерації.
For now, we have 126 children who were illegally deported to the Russian Federation and then returned either to the territory of Ukraine or to the territory of some European countries.
Вони всі мають свою особливу історію. Разом з тим, ми вже прослідковуємо тенденцію, згідно з якої російська сторона намагалася змінити мишлення дитини і виставляла Україну не в найкращому світі, а Російську Федерацію героєм.
Every child has their special story in such cases, but we can see the trend that the Russian Federation tried to change the mind of the children, to change their attitude, saying that Ukraine was bad and Russia was kind of a hero.
В будь-якому випадку хочу зазначити, що ми готові до будь-якої активної співпраці, готові долучатися до всіх існуючих проєктів, аби міжнародна спільнота нас почула і допомогла захистити права українських дітей.
And we are ready to any active cooperation. We are ready to engage in all the possible projects so that the international community can help us in protecting the interests of our children.
Дякую за увагу. Якщо будуть запитання, готова до відповіді.
Thank you for your attention, and I'm open to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Litvinova. And also for our audience, if you would please use the Q&A box and type in any questions you have. We're going to have a discussion following the panelist presentation. So next, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Kuleba.
Thank you so much. And it's a privilege for me to be here with you. And just now I'm in Kiev in Hope and Healing Center founded Save Ukraine NGO. And I'm a head of this organization. And only in this center, we have 100 children and mothers who were hugely traumatized during this war in combat zones, in occupied territories, and especially who were returned back from Russia Federation. And before that, Russians abducted these kids. And just now, it was yesterday, we returned back through our third rescue mission, 16 children who were abducted. And just now, let me invite one little lady, Margot, iди сюди. And it is a lot of children here and families. And Margot here, it's 8 years old girl. She was abducted 5 months ago, and maybe more. Her mother grew in orphanage, and when she grew, she get married, and now she has 3 kids. And Margot is older. And she placed her in Kherson region in boarding school. And after the invasion, she left in occupation. And she were kidnapped by Russians, and they left her in the checkpoints. And the Russians sent her to Russian orphanage. And mother tried to find her for a long time, and then found, and they asked us to rescue her, and we include her in our third rescue mission group with the mothers. We successfully finished this rescue operation just yesterday. It was very hard rescue mission, and on their way home, Russians did not allow them to cross 2 borders with Belarus. And they have to change these borders. And only third time, they spent 1 day standing day and night on the border with Russia and Latvia. And they crossed that border. 2 days ago, and immediately came to Ukraine. And just yesterday, they came to Kiev, and you can see a map of their trip. It was a very complicated rescue mission, because to reach Crimea and Kherson region, you have to go through a huge cycle through Poland or Latvia, Belarus, and then Russia, and then Crimea, and then occupied Kherson region. And we have to provide this mission trip just to rescue Ukrainian kids. Yeah, and thank you so much. Дякую тобі. Yeah. She's let me please forgive me, please, but let me show you, it's a children's room in our Hope and Healing Center, and children's playing here every day. Yeah, and let me continue. And through this rescue mission, we rescued 16 kids, and it was complicated because all of these kids were abducted and sent to different Russian territories and Crimea, and some children were in occupied Kherson region. That's why we had to divide this group, and they spent 2 weeks in Russia Federation in Crimea, and then returned back to Ukraine after that. And and very often Russians don't want to leave, don't want to allow these children go back to Ukraine. And our last mission was successful too, but we couldn't take back 2 kids because Russians did not allow them to go to Ukraine. But through this rescue mission, we returned back these 2 kids too. And I want to shortly inform you that on February, as of February 3rd, according to the Ukrainian state portal Children's of War, Russians deported more than 16,000 children. It's official information. However, Russian media reporting a horrifying number of 728,000 deported Ukrainian children. The occupiers are kidnapping Ukrainian children to the Russian Federation under the guise of an alleged evacuation and leisure. International humanitarian law classifies such actions as a war crime. Deportation and forcible transfer of persons is a crime against humanity under Article 7 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. This is every reason to believe that such abduction of children has been planned. First of all, the kidnapping of Ukrainian children is controlled by Russia at the highest state level. On October 26, Maria Lvova-Belova, the Russian President's Commissioner for Children's Rights, announced that she had adopted a boy kidnapped from Mariupol. According to her words, during that period, 350 orphans from the east of Ukraine have been placed to foster families in 16 regions of Russia. Secondary, the fact that the deportation campaign was planned in advance is also confirmed by the fact that Ukrainians, including children, were taken to filtration camps before being distributed to the regions of Russia. After going through the filtration, they would find themselves in Russia, and the process of their legalization. As a matter of fact, the Russian president simplified the process of granting Russian citizenship to Ukrainian children, and unsurprisingly, the process of adoption was simplified as well. We have another practice of the Russians when children in the occupied territories are taken under the guise of recreation in Russian camps. Having spent a long time in Russian territory and among Russian propagandists, children are more easily influenced by propagandists. Russians separate children from their parents and take advantage of the child's vulnerable state to exert psychological pressure. This is easy to do as soon as you take the child away from the parents. It is easy to manipulate them and palm them with your narratives. In children's camps, children are forcibly taught Russian history, language, and literature. Children, in fact, undergo an intensive course on de-Ukrainization, which destroyed their Ukrainianness. They are told almost daily that they are not useless to their parents. There is no future in Ukraine. A good future is possible only if you stay in Russia. Just today, I talked with several kids who were kidnapped and returned back, and they told me this story, how Russians brainwash them and how they telling horrible stories about Ukraine. At the same time, children are literally bought. Russians give them clothes, gadgets, release them from any responsibilities, and thus depriving them of the autonomy. Teenagers are very fond of this. Russians understand this and skillfully use it. They practice this technique all these 8 years. With the beginning of the war, they adopted it, and now children are Russified literally in months. So children end up in orphanages or adopted. And very often journalists asking me to explain, oh, why Russians not torturing children? They no need. They have the horrible propaganda, and they can brainwash children, and they can easily convert kids and clean their identity. And a few words about the danger of this illegal adoption procedure. As a result of the adopter can change not only the child's first and last name, but even the date of birth. This means that it will be very difficult for us to personify and identify our children in the future. And after adoption of this absurd law, Ukrainian children will be adopted according to a simplified procedure, and their document will be destroyed, which is a sign of genocide of the Ukrainian people and a violation of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And I want to tell you why Russians are doing this. First, they are trying to compensate for their demographic losses. For every Russian soldier killed, 7 or 8 Ukrainian children were kidnapped. 2, it's destruction of the Ukrainian ethnic groups. Instead of killing Ukrainian children on spot, they are abducted and re-educated. Third, illustrating propagandist narratives for the ordinary Russians. It's like one nation, or we are rescuing children from Ukrainian Nazis. And fourth, brainwashing children in order to send them to the next war with Ukraine. The 18, 20 years old soldiers from the so-called republics, new Russian republics on Donbass, are currently fighting on the Russian side. 8 years ago, they were 10, 12 years old children who were brainwashed by Russia and the occupation authorities. And what, in the end, what should the international community and United States do? I am terrified that the world will soon get used to the war in Ukraine. I'm afraid that the number of children killed and kidnapped will become a daily statistic, a norm for this world. That is why I constantly speak to the whole world and talk about the crime committed by Putin and the Russian army against Ukraine and Ukrainian children. It's one of my primary responsibilities. My organization, Save Ukraine, with many others Ukrainians fighting for our children. We can't get used to the war. We have to continue. We have already returned 46 children from Russia, and to continue our work, we need to help every citizen who cares about genocide, which is happening right now, should help us, must help us, and rescue that children who are suffering every day in my country because Stalins and because Russians want to kill our children, and in Russia Federation. And we are planning our next rescue mission. We launching programs. We have different programs all over Ukraine, community centers, We are building shelters, hope and healing centers, just only rescue children, restore their lives, and rebuild their lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mykola. And this is obviously very difficult to hear the extent of this. And in fact, that it's been going on since 2014 even, and that some of these children now are adults and have been even sent back as Russian soldiers. Certainly after, it seems that this has been stepped up, that the process of Russia trying to abduct children seems to have increased since February last year. And I think one of the indications of that, both our speakers have mentioned, which was the streamlining of Russian adoption laws last spring by Putin, which I think is a clear indication of that. One question to start with is, as the Prosecutor General's office or Mykola, I know that Save Ukraine also has a hotline and receives information from families missing children. As you receive and gather information about children who are abducted or you're afraid have been abducted to Russia or to occupied areas of Ukraine, like Crimea, I'm interested to see that this last operation also included Crimea. How is that data being collected and stored? And my question is there a need for some kind of an international registry? And I'm thinking of something like what was done after World War II with Holocaust victims, trying to reunite families. Is there a need to find some way to centrally record all of the information so that in the future, either families might try to find children, or perhaps children who were adopted in Russia would have a place to go to try to figure out if they were one of the children who were taken from Ukraine, for example? Would anyone like to answer that question?
I don't know, maybe Victoria, you can start.
Ну, я можу сказати, що так, нам потрібна ця інформація у вигляді списку, так? Але я дуже обережно ставлюсь до формування саме міжнародного реєстру, бо все ж таки персональні дані дітей є інформація дуже захищена і треба дуже виважено до цього підійти.
So I can say that, of course, we need to gather this information like in a big list, but I would be careful with the global, with some kind of a global register, because the personal information about children is very sensitive information.
Я думаю, це питання для роздумів. Ми, звісно, не відмовляємося, але пропрацюємо це питання, оскільки дійсно в подальшому сім'ї мають бути з'єднані.
I guess this is a question to be discussed and considered. So we do not say no, of course, but we shall process this issue and think about it, because in future, of course, we must unite families. We must bring them back together.
Yes, and I think that's a good point, that it would not be something public, but probably something that law enforcement, for example, would be controlling. Mykola, did you have any thoughts on that, or Dmytro?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Victoria. This information should be fully protected and law enforcement should be responsible. It's more state government issues. And as I know, Russians trying to examine health of all children, and they collect DNA of each child. And we have to protect. And it's I through our rescue missions, I understand how hard is return back a child, and they trying to block everything. That's why for us to better organize these processes, I think to collect DNA of children and relatives will be very helpful for future to return children back, because they can not prove, but tell that, oh, it is not relatives, it's not parents. And children can easily, through especially younger kids, can easily forget their relatives or parents if it's 1 year, 2, 3, 5 years old child in 1 year. And we understand that through Russian legislation, they can give them a status of orphan, and then through adoption process we can love these kids, because they will change, as I told you, change their names and last names and date of birth, and it will be very hard to find these kids, but DNA can help us with it.
Thank you for that. Nadia, did you want to say something?
Unmute myself.
Yeah.
Yes, I just want to commend Mykola and Dmytro, Save Ukraine. You know, once again, we see that the civil society of Ukraine, you know, is at the forefront of dealing with so many of these issues, you know, in partnership, of course, with the government. But Mykola, the numbers are so daunting. And the challenge, I mean, you have been doing this, 3 rescue missions, and as I understand it, less than 200 children have been returned. Is there a way to increase the numbers or expand this operation? It just is, to me, mind-boggling when we're talking 16,000 and less than 200. And, you know, the parents who are, you know, just stressed, not knowing where their child is. It's just hard to just even deal with. I just, what can be done to be more successful in this?
Thank you, Nadia. It's a hard question for us, because we have no any relation on the state level with the aggressor, with the Russia who killing our children. That's why we, as the NGO, trying to deal with it, but it's not enough. It's a sand in the big, huge ocean of abduction, and my call is to United Nations, to Red Cross, to big international organizations who must help through their procedures to return back Ukrainian families and children, because we have no any negotiation with the Russian enemies, but they can negotiate, they can help Ukraine return back our children and families. They can help us find our kids in Russia Federation. Through our last rescue mission, just today I talked with kids, and they told me that they know how many children in that facilities in Russia, and they exactly know how many of that children don't know where their parents. It's Ukrainian children who are waiting that their parents will find them, and who will help that kids in Russia Federation? Who will go there? My call to Red Cross, to UNICEF, to United Nations, please help us. I'm begging you, do something for these hundreds of thousands children, Ukrainian children, who are hostages. They captured, and we need this help.
Thank you. And
Yeah, if I might just add, when I've spoken about this issue, I reference the fact that in the United States, when a child is missing, you know, there's such a mobilization, and there's a thing called Amber Alert, right, where it just is all the law enforcement agencies, you know, media are, you know, mobilized to find, you know, that one child, and here we've got thousands. But I discovered last night that actually Ukraine has joined Amber Alert, I think, through the Minister for Digitalization. So perhaps that's another organization that could be pulled into dealing with this problem to, publicize it, but also provide some additional expertise. But you're right. I mean, this needs to be focused on much more. And I know I've been talking with Janice at the Helsinki Commission, and that they'll be doing things, of course, in Congress, and we will be also advocating in Congress to mobilize the organizations that you, Mykola, have identified. A lot of work to be done, and we invite others to join us in this work.
Exactly.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Janice, because she helped me and Dmytro to be in Helsinki Commission in December and have a speech and connect with congressmen, senators, and we had very good, very fruitful conversation. But I know it's not enough. We have to raise awareness in all over the world, not only in the United States, about genocide of Ukrainian children, because not a lot of people in the United States know that what happened in Ukraine, what happened with Ukrainian children. I want to tell you one more thing. Each fifth child, 20% of children, of Ukrainian children, are now under the influence of Russia Federation. After 2014, we have to not forget that invasion was not last year, but in 2014. And they grabbed Crimea, they occupied Donbass, territories of Donbass. And just now, in how many children in occupation in Russia Federation, it's 20% of children's population. It's genocide, and they brainwash these kids. They through Russian propaganda, and it's really tragedy of Ukrainian nation. We are calling about this. We trying to reach each person all over the world. Tell about what happened with our kids. Yeah, it's very important for us that to raise awareness about this problem.
Thank you very much. And we had several comments and questions online from our audience, also asking about the role of international organizations and whether organizations like the Red Cross or the United Nations could do more to help to find Ukrainian children. One of the things that occurs to me, Nadia, when you were talking about the Amber Alert program, which is, kind of specific to a specific child, but I wonder if there's more that could be done in terms of raising awareness inside Russia, even, of what is happening. I mean, we all know that it's extremely difficult to get real information about the war in Russia, that Russian propaganda is also directed inside Russia to its own citizens, not just outside. But, something along the lines of making sure that people who are in Russia who are looking to adopt children know that what they may be doing is a genocide, is taking in a child who has parents in Ukraine, whose families want them back.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps, not every adoptive family is really understanding what they're doing. Maybe they are buying into the propaganda that they're hearing from their own government. And I don't know if there's a way to counter that propaganda. And I think also internationally, we need to make sure that the message is out there, and that governments, civil society, everyone is speaking out that this is simply wrong, that any child that is being adopted in Russia, it should be suspect that this is in fact the case, that they have been abducted from Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you, Janice. And what is horrible in these circumstances, that Putin's commissioner on children's rights, she's example of a crime, because after many parents were killed in Mariupol, in occupied territories, she is kidnapping children to Russia Federation, and against any law, she's adopting children, Ukrainian children. She's not looking for their relatives, parents, but she's example for all Russia Federation. Guys, you can easily kill Ukrainian parents, kidnap these kids, and adopt these kids. And what could be worse? I don't know.
So
I
actually,
don't know.
she promotes worldwide or Russia-wide the violation of all international laws, and by showing this as an example, she actually promotes violation of the laws.
I wonder if there's any possibility to have some kind of, let's say, a tip line, something which is kind of what the Amber Alert system is, where public could call and say, hey, my neighbor's adopting a child and I'm really worried that this child could be Ukrainian. I don't know if it would work, but I'm just throwing that out there. It's any kind of a possibility.
We should be conscious that it will be very difficult to implement.
Yeah, of course.
Russian Federation, and
yeah,
it is very difficult. It is very difficult to reach Russian families
exactly
who can know this information, and because they are afraid. They are very afraid because Russians control everything. Yeah, security services.
That's a really good point. We're also getting some questions online about the trauma that the children are experiencing and how to help them when they do return. And we have one question about art therapy and different kinds of trauma healing programs and therapies. And I wonder if any of you would like to speak to the kind of programs that might be available for children when they are rescued.
Okay, maybe Dmytro, you can say, yeah.
Yes, I can start if I may. Mykola mentioned in his speech that we not only rescuing children from and not only returning them back from Russia. We also have programs, several programs that are in our programmatic focus that focus on trauma healing and any kind of psychological support. We have two Hope and Healing Center, and in one of them, Mykola is right now. So the group, when it came back to Ukraine, they go directly to our Hope and Healing Center, and we have different programs from 3 months up to 1 year for trauma healing, for working not only with children, but also with their relatives, with mothers, with everybody who suffered this horrible situation. And afterwards, we have a network of already 13 community centers that on everyday basis support children and families with psychological support, art therapy, trauma healing, education. You know that after several years of COVID with online education, now even online education becomes difficult in Ukraine because of blackouts and everything. So we develop our programs that target this issue, and we not only heal, not only rehabilitate children, but also support them in following the educational programs. So we have it's a full approach from rescuing through rehabilitation and reintegration to society.
And Dmytro, let me mention that we can launch more programs, more hope and healing centers, and help more children. Please welcome. If maybe you can help any family who were traumatized during this war, please help us do this. Help us help Ukrainian children recover them and heal their traumas.
Janice, if I could, I'm going to do a little commercial here for additional weapons to Ukraine and getting them in a timely manner. We support an art therapy program, and we had a chance to visit with the people running it. And they showed us paintings that some of the children are drawing, and all the tanks and the drones and things are colored blue and yellow, because they know those are the things that are protecting them and also their fathers. So the issue of what we send to Ukraine is not some esoteric, geopolitical discussion or chess game. The sooner we give Ukrainians what they need to win the war, the fewer victims there will be of Putin's war.
Yeah. Thank you, Nadia.
Absolutely. That's, of course, the overriding piece of it. We also have some questions coming in, I think, for the Deputy Prosecutor General, asking about how it's possible to investigate these cases of the children. What exactly can you do? And also, is there anything more that the United States or other governments or international organizations could do to help with these investigations?
Насправді розслідування вказаної категорії злочинів є достатньо складним.
So the investigation of the mentioned category of crimes is really difficult.
Ми просимо допомоги і надаємо доручення оперативному підрозділу, а саме Департаменту національного захисту державних інтересів Служби безпеки України.
And we give some requests and ask for help from the Department for the National Protection of the Security Service of Ukraine.
І вони своїми каналами отримують інформацію про переміщених дітей.
And they, through their channels, obtain some information about the transferred children.
Крім того, ми протоколами Берклі оглядаємо інформацію з відкритих джерел про всі випадки переміщення.
Also, according to Berkeley protocols, we review all the information from the open sources about the cases of transferred and displaced children.
Звісно, процедура є надскладна, тому я завжди акцентую увагу на тому, що цифра 16 тисяч не є точною цифрою, бо вона достеменно не перевірена.
So the procedure is extremely difficult, and that is why I always say that the figure of 16,000 of displaced children, it is not an exact figure because we cannot really assess it.
Але ми намагаємося вести, той список ідентифікованих осіб, про які тут йшла мова, для того, щоб встановити родинні зв'язки, ідентифікувати дитину.
But we are trying to keep this list of the identified persons, so to establish the children's family ties to find their relatives.
Навіть певні складнощі є з допитами повернутих вже дітей, тому що не завжди діти відразу готові для допиту.
Also, we have some difficulties with interrogation of children who have been returned, because not always they are willing, they are ready to undergo this procedure.
Буду відверта, коли мова йде про те, яку допомогу нам треба, мабуть, що все ж таки я маю глибше вивчити це питання, чим 9 днів на посаді. Тому я продумаю, більш детально ознайомлюсь і повідомлю, яку би підтримку нам необхідно було надати для якісного розслідування.
So frankly speaking, as to the assistance, I have to consider this issue, to examine this, because I have for now only 9 days in this position. So I will review this, I will consider this issue, and I'll let you know what kind of assistance we would like to get.
Thank
I
you
would
very
like
much.
to jump in quickly. I just want to
Yes.
mention that Save Ukraine is really open for cooperation with all law enforcement bodies, including the Office of Prosecutor General. And also I wanted to mention that like for already several weeks, Mykola is meeting on everyday basis with the experts and investigators of International Criminal Court. So we are exploring all possibilities to file all those cases and all those violations of international law.
Thank you. And for Ms. Litvinova, I think it's a really good point you made about how difficult it is to interview children when they've just been returned after traumatic experiences like that. We find this also with victims of human trafficking. There have to be very special protocols in place that police use to take a trauma-informed approach to interviewing victims and trying to get information without re-traumatizing, because obviously no one wants to see that happen. I have another question that's come in, which I believe, Mykola, you can answer, and also perhaps Ms. Litvinova would like to answer it as well, which is a question about whether there are incentives being given to Russian families for adopting Ukrainian children. Such as, are there any incentives that the Russian government is giving to families to encourage them to adopt Ukrainian children, for example, cash payments or anything like that?
Yeah.
Мова йде про те, чи дає Росія
Financial support. Yeah, you know what is it tricky? That Russians not adopt Ukrainian children. After the Dmytro law, as you know, they forbid or it's prohibited international adoption. And to adopt Ukrainian children, they simplify procedure of receiving Russian citizenship. They first should give Russian citizenship to a child, and then they adopt Russian child. It's so tricky, and they trying to change everything. It's like if you ask, you are adopting Ukrainian child. No, we adopting Russian child, because first of all we give status of orphan. First of all, we kidnap or kill parents or prison parents and give status of orphan, and then give Russian citizenship, and then adopt this child. And friends, you can see these happy children here who is playing, who several days ago had been in Russia Federation because they were kidnapped, and their mothers did not know that it's a clear plan of Putin and Russian government to kidnap, give status of orphan during 6 months or a year, and then give Russian citizenship and then adoption. And we have no idea how many children were placed in Russian families through adoption, through guardianship, of foster care, and I know it is thousands of children. Yeah, that's why I don't know how to answer. Yeah, they support families who take a Ukrainian child, and you know, yesterday or before yesterday, it was advertisement in Russian social media, and what was appear that one family told, I received Ukrainian child to family, and they sold for sexual exploitation this child. It was 250,000 Russian rubles for a child. They told, if you need a child for sex, we have Ukrainian child. You can buy this child for sex. It is last news, and every day we can find different news about kids, and every day more and more different news, and it is horrible. It is horrible what happened there.
And that's actually a good point, that many of these children are also very vulnerable to being victims of human trafficking as well, once they reach the Russian Federation. Mykola, do you know when the families in Russia adopt these children, are they given financial support from the Russian government for the children?
Yeah, it's both, and foster care, guardianship, and adoption is supported by state government, and they have financial support. Depends on what child, what age, and they say with disability or not. Because for a child with disability, they have more support, maybe 8 times more support. For a child without disability, they have 20,000 rubles. It's close maybe $400 a year support.
Thank you very much. I've also gotten a question. Perhaps, Dmytro, you could type this into the Q&A. If somebody wants to contact you all to support you, can you give them your web address or how they might be able to do that?
You are unmuted, Dmytro. You are unmuted.
Sorry. Yes, of course. We have a live website. We have a lot of social media. I will share here in the chat all our links, and we would be really grateful for your support. We also have newsletters where we share all our achievements, all our activities, and all our news. So please follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, and also I will provide you with the link.
Thank you. And perhaps one more point for Deputy Prosecutor General Litvinova. You mentioned in your opening statement about the importance of justice, basically looking at the possibility of collecting evidence of these abductions as war crimes, as genocide, as crimes against humanity, and possibly having cases brought through the International Criminal Court, or also, I assume, through Ukrainian courts. And I just wondered if you would like to speak more to the justice piece of this in the end.
Так, звісно, для нас дуже, по-перше, оскільки ми як органи прокуратури здійснюємо процесуальне керівництво досудовим розслідуванням, то це є розслідування і притягнення винним є основний аспект нашої роботи.
the prosecution bodies, we conduct the procedural guidance of these cases. So the investigation of these crimes and prosecution of perpetrators is our priority.
Коли я казала про злочини проти людства, то хочу звернути увагу, що ми активно співпрацюємо з Міжнародним кримінальним судом в рамках кейсів депортації дітей.
When I said about the crimes against humanity and about the cooperation, we closely cooperate with the ICC in the cases of children's deportation.
Вони вже проводять слідчі дії, прокурори, за дорученням прокурора МКС, вже проводяться слідчі дії на українській території щодо допиту свідків, оглядають матеріали наших вже напрацьованих кримінальних проваджень та інші дії.
And according to the instruction of the prosecutor of the ICC, their representatives already conduct some procedural investigative actions in the territory of Ukraine. For example, they conduct interrogations, they review the materials of the criminal proceedings, etc.
Наші національні процедури передбачають згоду Генерального прокурора на проведення таких дій, яку він надає без всяких зволікань для оперативного зібрання доказів на вимогу прокурора Міжнародного кримінального суду.
According to our national procedures, the consent of the prosecutor general is required for such kind of procedures, and he always gives his consent so that these actions are conducted in a prompt way.
Коли я казала про злочини геноциду, то ми їх можемо поки переслідувати виключно за це національним законодавством в національному судочинстві.
When I told about the genocide crime, for now we can prosecute such crimes only under our national legislation in our national courts.
Тому ми збираємо докази, які вказують на знищення ідентичності українських дітей, про те, що я вже казала.
So we collect evidence of destroying the identity of our Ukrainian children.
І як казав Микола, і це підтверджено матеріалами нашого кримінального провадження, частковими допитами повернутих дітей. Дійсно, з дітьми проводяться пропаганда, спрямована на знищення їх національної ідентичності.
And as Mr. Mykola said, and according to the materials of our criminal proceedings, namely the interrogations conducted with the children who were brought back to Ukraine, really there is propaganda from the Russian Federation which is aimed at destroying the identity of our Ukrainian children.
Ми казали про уповноваженого президента Російської Федерації з прав дітей, і підтверджується допитами, що вона дійсно приїжджала до одного з хлопця і наполягала на тому, що йому необхідно отримати, переконувала його в тому, що йому необхідно отримати російське громадянство та пов'язувати своє майбутнє з Російською Федерацією, залякуючи дитиною тим, що в Україні немає майбутнього.
And we were talking about the commissioner for the children's rights of the Russian Federation. And actually, it is confirmed that according to the interrogation of one of the children, she came to one boy and she told him about the importance to get the Russian citizenship and that he would have future in the Russian Federation, not in Ukraine.
В цій ситуації, про яку кажу, це була дитина 16-річного віку. Все ж таки це достатньо дорослий, вже можна сказати, молодий хлопець, тому ця пропаганда не вплинула активно на цю дитину. Але я погоджуюсь з Миколою, що чим молодші діти, тим вони швидше коригують свої погляди.
So the case I'm talking about, it was about the child who is 16, so he's almost adult man, and that is why the propaganda did not influence him really. But I agree that the younger is the child, the more influence he or she can be under, according to this propaganda.
Ну, підсумовуючи, скажу, що, звісно, ми, як органи прокуратури, зацікавлені в збиранні доказів і скеруванні, забезпеченні притягнення винних до відповідальності. Це є основним напрямком нашої роботи.
And to sum up, I shall say that as the prosecution bodies, we are, of course, interested in the collection of evidence and bringing to responsibility those, the perpetrators of these crimes. This is our top priority.
Thank you very much. I think we're coming towards the end of our time, so I wondered if each of our panelists might like to make just have one last word, if you would like, and then Nadia, perhaps I will leave it to you then to conclude. So perhaps let's go in maybe reverse order. Maybe Dmytro, if you'd like to have a word, and then Mykola, and then Ms. Litvinova, just a final word, and then we'll turn it back to Nadia.
Thank you very much, Janice. We really appreciate this possibility to take part in this briefing, in this forum. We can see your support, and we are very grateful for all the efforts you do to raise awareness about this huge problem. We are doing our best on the ground, so please keep going, continue supporting us with raising awareness about this huge problem. The only possibility to resolve this issue, to resolve this problem, is raising awareness internationally. So thank you very much for all your support and everything you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's an extremely good point about raising the awareness internationally. I think that's the big one, and also trying to get the word out, perhaps even inside Russia. Mykola, would you like to have a last word?
One sec. I want to have a last word, but with these beautiful ladies. Yeah, and they are free now. They reunited with their parents. It's only 4 girls from, you can see these boys. They are playing here and in our Hope and Healing Center. They can be happy, they will be happy, but hundreds of thousands of children are captured, and we have to return them home. We have to reunite them with their parents, and we have to help them to rebuild their life. And I beg you to help Ukrainian children be returned to normal life. And we were very grateful to all Americans who are praying and standing with us, to supporting us every day. But we need more support to rescue our families and our children, our future. And maybe you, може, ви хочете просто помахати і подякувати? Yeah. They say дякую. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, Deputy Prosecutor General Litvinova, would you like to also say something?
Я також дуже вдячна вам за можливість проговорити зараз ці важливі питання, і дякую наперед за допомогу, яка може бути оказана нам в рамках розслідування. Я подумаю про наші потреби і повернуся до цього питання.
I also would like to say thank you for this opportunity to speak about these very important issues, and thank you in advance for your help, for your support. I will think about what we need, what kind of support and help we need, and I will let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will say that in the U.S. Congress and the Helsinki Commission, we are standing ready to help and looking at what kind of legislation that we might also be able to adopt that would help move this issue forward. So Nadia, it's over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. I said, we've got people that are on the front lines. Janice is on the front lines in the political and policy arena, and of course, Mykola and Dmytro doing these rescue missions. And now with the new Deputy Prosecutor General, she has a different role to play. I think today's discussion was rich with ideas that I think need to be pursued and explored as to how we can accomplish getting some of this attention that is much needed. As Mykola mentioned, rallying some of the relevant international communities like the UN and the Red Cross or whoever. And so I look forward to working with everyone. And also I would hope, I think that perhaps in a few months we should return and to see if we're making any progress. And as I said, we will be having in the coming weeks additional webinars that will deal more deeply with some of the issues of, let's say, trauma and the other organizations that are working in this arena. So thank you again so very much. God bless you and your efforts, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava, many blessings to you. Thank you so
Героям
much.
слава.